What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hackness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredient that makes workshops work. Today with me on the show is Hailey Temple from Mural. Some of you might know her from the Backstage Pass, and that's what we're talking about. So learning from facilitating different groups, whether they participate or just observe, and what it means to be a good co-facilitator. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, why don't you visit workshops.work and download my free one-page summary. And now lean back and enjoy the show. Hello, Hailey. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, I've been sitting in the background of the Backstage Mural Pass, observing you in awe and your presentation skills. So now I'm excited to learn from you.
Yeah, excited to share. And it's been awesome having you on some of the Backstage Passes as well as one of our participants too. So you've seen the many sides and facets that go into Backstage Pass.
Absolutely. And now I'm curious to hear how you perceive it as a facilitator and what you learn from it. When did you actually start calling yourself a facilitator?
So it helps to, I guess, understand a little bit of context where I came from, because I definitely did not take a course or anything on facilitation, but I've definitely found this need and this gap for someone to manage the flow and the conversation in a lot of my meetings when I started working, especially because there was really no conversation happening. A lot of the meetings that I was attending, it was one person telling everyone else something, presentation, the classic PowerPoints and things like that. And I was having trouble, first of all, staying awake in those meetings. And my boss would have to elbow me to stay awake. But I also just realized that there has to be a better way to manage these conversations. And a lot of my job at that point was to host. I got into work through human-centered design and design thinking and learning that approach. And so I was responsible for, at that point, facilitating workshops. And I was still learning the art and craft there. So I was very much just watching and observing and learning and carrying the supplies when they needed the supplies, or the sticky notes and the markers, but then not seeing those workshop experiences happen in my own meetings outside of the workshop, and especially I was working with a team that was spread out around the world. And a lot of those sessions were the same, very disengaged. It was a lot of just it was hard to share information. So I found the opportunity to step into that role and both help create conversation, both by planning meetings in that way, and then also just by visual note taking and capturing and being able to share those notes back with people. So when I called myself a facilitator was when I realized that I was at the helm in a way of managing the conversation, which for any facilitator, we're not supposed to be the ones at the front of the stage, but a lot of times you feel that pressure to be the one there managing the conversation, and having people look to me to say, okay, well, where do we go from here? I think was when I realized that's the role I'm taking on, and having other people say, you did a great job with that meeting. Can you come do what you did for my own meeting? Nice. So that's when I think I started calling myself a facilitator and understanding the value and the responsibility that comes with being a facilitator.
So what would you have wished to know back then, or that your boss had known about hosting better meetings that don't make you fall asleep?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So many things, right? I think one of them is realizing the role of a facilitator, or having someone point it out. And what I mean is that pressure I mentioned we put on ourselves as facilitators to give people this great experience and be almost like a showman in a way in meetings, it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on you to say like, okay, well, this went well, quote unquote. And I don't even know, like, how do you, and not even knowing what going well, a meeting going well looked like until hearing from other facilitators what that meant. But, and realizing that the job of facilitator is not to be the showman, but to be the person that holds the space and makes space for equal contribution, for creativity, for conflict, for resolution, whatever needs to happen in that meeting. And so success is helping the group achieve that objective. And so I wish I knew that a little bit sooner, because it would have taken a tremendous amount of pressure off of me in a lot of meetings. But also just, I think it would have changed my approach to facilitation and creating meetings a lot very different. And approach to meetings, another thing I wish I knew was just how much prep goes into designing the meeting experience. So you can't just show up to a meeting and facilitate. There's all this work you have to come and understand the dynamics of the room and the dynamics of the people and what success looks like to all these different people. And I was thankfully given great instruction on human-centered design methods to bring into that space, but there's all these nuances that people don't tell you about, especially when you have to pivot, that you just kind of learn out of necessity. And yeah, I think that all just comes from not necessarily knowing or having any exposure to that stuff before, but I think the best way to learn was just by figuring it out. And I always say to people, just messing up a lot and learning and recovering. Yes, exactly. So many fails forward, thankfully. So, yeah. And what feels bad to me or felt so weird to me was someone who was like, "That was brilliant. How did you do that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm glad that seemed okay to you, because I was dying." So, yeah.
So funny how the perception shifts of what you do and how it's felt in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you learned from human-centered design then about the conception of a workshop? What is human-centered design about? Yeah,
human-centered design, it stemmed a lot of it, of course, from product development. And I think that the buzzword of design thinking is about empathy, putting yourself in the situation or understanding the needs of the people who you're solving for. And I think that I haven't designed products per se. I've designed like services and experiences and workshops and programs and all that stuff. But I think a lot of the beauty of human-centered design for meeting and workshop design and even culture design is understanding the people who are going to be in the room and what their mindset is and their attitudes towards the topic you're going to be talking about, and then being able to create an experience that's going to bring out what's needed in that conversation so that you can help get the work done or accomplish success or get to the end goal. And I feel really thankful for that. I had that exposure very early in my career to human-centered design, because I know a lot of people are trying to learn it later, and it's a mindset shift for sure. Where for me, it's just, that's the way I learned and was trained. And I think it also made me, especially, I started my career in a very big corporate setting with a lot of people who were much older than me and had a lot more seniority than me. And I didn't feel, I think human-centered design really celebrates curiosity and the ability to ask questions. And thankfully, I felt always very safe to ask quote unquote stupid questions, because it was just curiosity. And so in any facilitation session, I think a big role of the facilitator is also to ask those questions and to help other people ask questions that aren't being said, or catch those nuances. So I think human-centered design, I guess, overall helped me think about my audience, quote unquote, of who I'm designing the experience for, and then giving me the confidence and maybe the ability to ask great questions. So, which has served me quite well, I think, throughout my experience. And I'm always a very curious person. So it's awesome.
It's like a lens that you put on, right? And then everything you do, you think of the audience or the researchers.
Yeah.
And this makes me now curious when I think of the Backstage Pass, the Mural Backstage Pass that you co-facilitate, and maybe you can also shortly explain what that actually is. I would be curious because you don't know who's going to join this workshop. So how to put yourself in the shoes of your audience if you actually don't know who's going to step in. So maybe you can start by explaining to our audience now who might not be familiar with the Mural Backstage Pass, what that is.
Yeah. I'm like smiling because it's just so fun. So yeah, Backstage Pass is a weekly, it's not a webinar, it's not a workshop, it's almost a reality TV show in a way where we pick a different topic every week and we focused on something around online collaboration or online facilitation using Mural. And the reason, I guess the inception for Backstage Pass came from Jim Kalbach and Amelia Astrom, who are my two teammates, because they had customers coming to them saying, you know, we would really learn a lot from just watching you guys who are experts and masters of Mural, just watching you work and seeing how you did that and kind of your hacks to learn this tool. And Mural is a digital board for collaboration and to facilitate these visual collaborative sessions online. And so we said, okay, we're going to open up this space for people to come in, watch experts of Mural and experts of facilitation and collaboration learn from how we work. And it's going to be raw and somewhat unscripted because we're experts, I guess, which I always am like, no, I'm not really an expert, but I'm always learning so much.
You're not an expert. Who is?
I guess I think I hesitate to say expert because I'm always learning from people coming on Backstage Pass too. Like, okay, I know how to use the tool well and I know how to facilitate, but I don't want people to be like, oh, yeah, you're the expert and I'm not, so I can't add to the conversation or add to the session. And Backstage Pass, to your point, we have Mark Tippin and I co-hosting, and then we have some participants on the session live working with us, and then we have this audience who's not using their audio or video, they're just kind of watching and observing. So for them, it's kind of a webinar. And so you have these three different dynamics you have to deal with. And I was saying one of my favorite things about Backstage Pass and about these experts is the fact that we can bring people in who don't feel like experts at Mural or online collaboration and facilitation. And I love when they say that, like, I've never really used Mural, I've never done this. And I'm like, great, like ask those quote unquote stupid questions to us because you're representing people who are feeling really intimidated by this tool right now and intimidated by trying to figure out the value of this tool. And you asking these questions is going to help other people feel less intimidated. So like, thank you for being that person in a way. Yeah. So that's Backstage Pass and how it started, basically. It's evolved so much, which is the best part.
And I wonder, so how do you actually prepare? Because you said it's unscripted. So you would come up with a topic that you think is relevant to the audience. And then to what extent can you serve those who are actually not really part of the workshop because they're backstage? As you said, they are not connected to the audio or the video. You don't see them, you don't hear them. Yeah. You might be able to follow the chat, but I guess that's very noisy. And you have those who are actually participating that might be experts or totally newbies.
Yeah, gosh, it's been a lot of iteration. Thankfully, our audience is becoming this community that's really wonderful, where people want to come back every week because it's a different topic, because they might learn something new, and a lot of them do, which is wonderful. And we also ask them for topics. We want to show them something that's relevant and something that they might be struggling with, or a challenge. So I guess our approach to it is we have this backlog of topics from people in the chat who are asking for it so you learn more about something. And we say, okay, who can we bring in to share more about this? And what activity can we do to show them and discuss this topic as part of the session? So for example, today we're doing something on designing digital working spaces. And so we're having this facilitator who somebody recommended him and said he designs awesome murals. I think you should have him on a Backstage Pass to share his experience. And I met with him maybe for half an hour before, because he never seen Backstage Pass. So that was interesting too, because a lot of people kind of figure out the flow once they've seen it. But I said, you're going to have about 40 minutes of time to do a collaborative session. This is not just you sharing out your wisdom. This is stage on the stage. This is you helping teach others how to design their own awesome murals. And in the meantime, Mark Tippin and I will mention and highlight some of the stuff that you're doing, and other people will be working and you're facilitating, basically. And that's your assignment. Oh, we can sync one more time if you have questions and hear the logistics, and you'll dial in 15 minutes before and we'll see what happens and who shows up. So we have a loose sense of a flow, but I think that's also kind of the fun, is it keeps me on my toes. Every week I don't know what's going to happen necessarily. I don't know who's going to be there. Even from Mural, I invite people, our employees, in to learn and be part of the experience. I don't know who's going to show up. That's always a surprise. So it's very much it's a game in a way. So I think thankfully Mark and I have a really good relationship where we kind of know where we excel as co-facilitators, and he will be the one kind of sharing, adding some richness and context and pointing things out, and I'm kind of in the background still facilitating, but playing more of the role of trying to engage the chat and kind of pulse checking the audience. And like, for example, sometimes people ask, do you mind zooming and I can't see that? How did you do that? Can you do this? Can you share that again? Or asking questions, and I'm responding to them out loud. So it kind of feels like there's someone just throwing lots of things at me and I'm juggling them all at once and trying to delegate this.
Multi-attention.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, but it's such good practice, because that's what, as facilitators online, you have to do in a lot of ways with the workshop. So, yeah.
And it sounds as if that's also what I experienced, that you're not only facilitating the session, but also kind of live reporting what's happening and just verbalizing and visualizing what's happening, because you also do a lot of visual recording during the session.
And that stems from going back to when I was in meetings and falling asleep. Like that's very natural for me at this point, where I need to do that to translate a lot of what I'm hearing. And so by putting it out visually, it helps me make sense of what's going on, and hopefully helping other people make sense of what's going on as well, and why we did something.
So what is the mindset and skill set that you nurture, that you need in order to practice this multitasking, juggling multiple different audiences in a workshop that is almost a training or a live experience?
Oh man, mental juggling is one of them. It was funny, yesterday we were on the beach and there was somebody practicing juggling, and my husband Ryan goes, "Can you juggle?" And I was like, I can mentally juggle a lot of different things at once, and I do. So that's definitely important. I think it goes back to those core facilitation skills in a lot of ways too. Active listening is so important, and listening not just for in an audio sense, because yes, I do have to listen to the conversation and the people actively on video, but it's also the people who are typing into the chat and being able to go and read what they're saying and also empathize with them too. I mean, making sure I understand, like, okay, is there a lull? Do I need to kind of take a step back and explain what just happened for people who might not understand what just went on, so that people feel like they're not getting lost in the shuffle or that this isn't helpful for them? I think in terms of the tools and technology, having the mastery of the video conferencing tools and Mural and the chat and all these different elements that we're bringing into the experience. And then just a lot of sense making. I think facilitators need to bring together the different voices that they're hearing in the space and help people understand either they're saying the same thing or that there are vastly different things going on in this conversation, and help make sense of that too. So I think it is a lot of, for people who are used to doing in-person facilitation, it's not a huge jump other than the technology. And I think it's also just a mindset shift from how did I do this in person and how do I bring that same output or experience online.
Yes, I think there's not much difference once you master the technology and you don't lose headspace and focus from just,
Mm-hmm. And needing to be open and okay with iteration too. Like we've messed up some sessions or felt like, dang, we didn't help, or we'll have people who do feel very lost and overwhelmed. And so Mark and I have to take a step back and be like, okay, what happened there? What do we need to fix for next time? How can we help this group feel more engaged? And so it's been a lot of being willing to adapt and change things. And I think I have to give credit to Mark, because when he's a wonderful human being, but also just having a lot of trust with my co-facilitator that if I need to shuffle something in the tech, or I can't talk out loud necessarily a lot of the times and do the tech. So he's there to always fill in the space, and we complement each other really well. So that's quite wonderful too.
Nice. And before I ask more questions about the experience of co-facilitating, because I think that's, a very exciting aspect, I would like to come back to what you mentioned about engaging the backstage audience.
Mm-hmm.
Many facilitators struggle to even engage those people who are actually supposed to actively contribute.
Mm-hmm.
You have to engage, or you want to engage, those who don't have video and cannot interact on the mural.
Mm-hmm.
What is the secret sauce to engage people who are basically just sitting in a webinar?
Yeah, well, I always try and think about webinars I've attended and how boring some of them can be. Like, I don't want to just hear, and that's the same, like, I don't want people to just hear me talking the whole time or hear someone else talking the whole time, because that's not exciting. Like, I think, or I'm not learning or getting value from just watching. So we've tried a few things to different degrees. So anytime that we can take a moment to ask people questions and get them engaged really helps. So I'll give you an example. So I think we always try to do a check-in with the people who are participating live, and we have them share out loud. So probably later today I'll do like, what's one thing that you want to celebrate that happened this week? And let's go around and have everybody who's participating with their audio and visuals of their camera share out. But then I also ask the group on who's in the webinar, who's not active, to type it in the chat and invite them to contribute as well. And I'll take some time to read out what some of those responses have been. And so I think that participatory experience for them and that involvement is something that, even though people are engaging a different community that we're going for, but it really helps.
Yeah, so basically giving them the impression and feeling from the beginning that they're even not seen, they're still heard, and they do have a voice, and that you will listen.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even sometimes we invite them into the mural too to participate. Like even if they're not going to be, and that's a whole nother like herding cats experience where we'll give them the link to the mural and we'll say, you come on to this mural and you type in some stuff to respond to this prompt. And it's worked in varying degrees. Sometimes having 60 people in a space and not being able to help them, or some people feel very lost. Some people feel like you're not giving me clear directions. It's this crazy experience, but people really enjoy, at least in that way, being heard or being engaged or part of the discussion, the visual discussion as well.
Hi, this is Andrew. I'm a facilitator and head of customer success at Session Lab, the dynamic workshop planner tool. More than 30,000 facilitators, trainers, and coaches use our workshop planner tool and save time and effort in the design process. So, how do they do it? Our drag and drop agenda builder makes it easy to transform your ideas into high-quality workshops, and the timing of your agenda automatically updates when you make changes. You can collaborate in real time with your colleagues and easily share professional-looking printouts with your clients. And if you need inspiration, you can check out our library of more than 500 activities and exercises and simply drag the ones you need right into your workshop agenda. So check out Session Lab to save time and effort in your workshop design process. And now get your first 2 months of Session Lab Pro absolutely free at sessionlab.com/workshopswork.
What's your favorite exercise?
I really like just taking a deep breath with people, especially lately. People just kind of, it's whatever exercise that I feel responds to what people need, not just what's the goal of the workshop in a way. So I love debriefing. I'm actually should be a lot better at debriefing than I am, but I love unpacking what just happened and why did we do that, and helping people get that aha moment. But I think my favorite exercise overall would be just doing a quick little meditative moment with people, because I need it a lot before a session, so it's a little bit self-serving. But I need to, calm down. But I think that especially right now when people are working online and they're constantly switching contexts, giving people time to be present, to put down, to stop multitasking or to feel the pressure of multitasking, and to help them get focused and centered is really valuable. So that's probably my favorite. It's really simple and really effective.
Yeah, and I get that. Especially we arrive in the space, and in an on-site setting, we have time to walk to the actual workshop room, and this gives us the mental space to arrive there physically and mentally. But if we just turn on the Zoom and maybe we just left the other one a minute ago, it's quite difficult to make the shift immediately.
Yeah, I love that language you just used too, like a mental arrival to the space together. That's how it feels too, when you do that breath and take a moment and it's like, okay, now we're all here in this moment together. We've arrived. Physically, we're here, but also mentally, we're here.
Yeah. And for the debriefing, would you do this as a kind of routine after each exercise to capture the learnings, or at the end of the session?
Definitely at the end. And I totally want to own up to the fact that I don't always, because I think, and this is something, there's so much to learn about facilitation, right? Is the power of the debrief, and doing it at the end is just kind of unpacking what just happened. Why did we do certain things we did? And how do we feel after the fact? I think it would be really powerful to do it between every activity, but I also imagine it might get a little bit, I think there's this storyline in a meeting, and especially depending on the amount of time you have, there's this kind of crescendo and decrescendo of the experience. So I think at the end of that arc, that narrative arc you've made, it's important to do that. So I don't think it's necessary after every activity, but at a point where you feel like you've the conversation has led to this point where there's been some sort of resolution or some sort of moment where you need to give people a chance to take a step back and unpack what happened. So it could be at the end of a multi-day workshop. It could be at the end of an hour-long meeting. But I definitely don't think that at the moment I take enough time, or many people take enough time to do debriefs, because it's the forgotten child in a lot of ways of workshops.
And it's actually a wasted opportunity, because again, I think you follow this 1 hour backstage pass and you're full of ideas, and then without the debriefing, maybe you just jump on the next call, and then after the next call you might not remember what actually happened. And I think by taking a breath, maybe even at the end, and reflecting, okay, what have we actually learned and what are we taking away? What may we want to implement maybe in our next session? Just to help to really make it a learning experience.
Right, and a shared experience. Yeah. So what did we learn? Like, other people may have learned something very different or seen it from a different lens than you've seen it. And that's the greatest part of a debrief, is just like, oh, I never saw it like that. Wow, thanks for highlighting that. Yeah. And see, now I'm determined in my Backstage Pass today to do a debrief and make space and time for it. Even if it's short, even if it's one question, at least giving that space is really nice.
Yeah.
To the group.
True, and the shared learning. Yeah, totally. You're this awesome co-facilitation team with Mark, where you do the visual recording and the zooming in and explaining what's happening, and Mark is almost like the storyteller who fills in the gaps, as you mentioned, when you're doing your thing and you need to focus, and then he picks it up. And it seems magic, as if you've never done anything else.
Thank you. He's the best.
Yeah. So what makes for you a good co-facilitator?
So I think that facilitation, I really don't like facilitating by myself, and for anything really. And that was my training, I guess, when I started facilitating, was we're always going to have 2 people in any session, because it's a dance, really. So while there's always something that has to be done, both from managing the conversation to also managing the space, like that's the backstage experience, is seeing what pieces and what things need to move in the background to help the group get to the intended goal. And I think a good co-facilitator is someone that I trust. And that doesn't come from, like, I can't pop into a room with somebody and just be like, yep, we're both doing this thing, cool, that's fine. Like, I need to know that person really well, at least not from a personal perspective per se, although that helps, right? But knowing their strengths as a facilitator and where they do their best work, so that I can also help fill in gaps for them. Like you said, Mark does a great job filling in when I'm working, and the same thing, I can do that for him. Like, he's not necessarily the one who's going to be on the back end working and coordinating, and I know that, so I'm the one who's capturing. And that's like, our meetings are like that too, where he has these like wonderful, I wish I recorded all of our meetings, because he has these wonderful ideas and these great stories to tell, and then me getting to capture visually and just put it on paper and share it out, or paper, quote unquote, digital paper, and share it out, is really powerful. And I think it translates, to your point, I'm glad it does translate well into how we facilitate together. So it's being willing to build that trust with a person and both have the awareness of your strengths, of one another's strengths and your own strengths. And so that when you see in the moment what needs to happen or what's not happening, you can step in and help the group succeed. So That's really great. When you don't have that, that's when you have those moments, those weird pauses, or those weird something isn't where it quote unquote should be, because there was just not awareness in a way between, like someone misstepped in a way. And it's okay, it happens, but it's like, okay, well, how do you learn to avoid that misstep again? So yeah, we work well together.
And I always wonder to what extent co-facilitators need to have the same style or rather be complementary. Because, for instance, I've co-facilitated once with someone who's very much improvising and, we figure it out. And I love to improvise, yes, but I still need my structure.
Mm-hmm.
And then it almost felt uncomfortable for me on the spot to not knowing, and it was the first time we co-facilitated, but then it almost felt uncomfortable not knowing what will happen and me needing my structure. And I can imagine that this translates to the group, that they will also maybe feel lost or feel this tension.
Yeah. That's so fascinating, because the dynamic between the co-facilitators, it can translate. It's almost like parents in a way. Like if your parents are tense, you kind of feel it, and you feel that mood and that tension between them. And so you have to, I don't know if you necessarily have to always be like, everything's fine and we're all good and there's nothing wrong, but you do need to come as a united front, I think, in a lot of ways as co-facilitators. But in terms of skill set or styles, I kind of go back and forth, because I think Mark and I have very different strengths as facilitators. And I really like that, because we like filling in those gaps or being able to dance. I feel like if we were too similar, it kind of is like your spouse or your partner. If you were too similar, you wouldn't have an opportunity to grow, and you wouldn't have this different perspective. And I don't think it would push the group in the way that it needs to, and push you as a facilitator either. But I think it's a lot of chemistry as well, where if you guys just don't vibe in a way, it's going to make the other people feel off too. Like people can tell and can read that in a way too.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think when I'm getting to know someone, I'm going to co-facilitate with them, I like to know, like, what do you enjoy doing in a session? Like, what brings you happiness when you're facilitating? And where can I fill in? And where can I work with you? So I think there always has to be some sort of agreement or understanding of one another's styles. Because part of me thinks like that improvisation, I'm the same. Like I like to make a plan and have a structure, but then I feel like the improvisation would make me feel really nervous. But then I would feel grateful that someone feels confident improvising. So I'd be like, okay, let's see how this goes. And if it doesn't, we go back to the plan in a way. So how did it go for you?
Yeah, it was basically that. So I played along, and when I realized that, maybe the participants get a little bit lost, I knew that I could fall back into the structure and kind of make this invitation.
Yeah, you can never make your co-facilitator like look bad though. Like like that didn't that was his idea or her idea, and like they messed up. Yeah, but you're like, okay,
that's awesome. Shall we try this?
Yeah, let's take a coffee break and we'll come back.
Yeah, it's like on an improvisation stage. You always try to make your scene partner look great, no matter what. Yeah. Do you have a kind of sign language, or do you use the chat with Mark, or do you just,
Yes, that's another thing in terms of technology, and to your point, the multitasking and Backstage Pass too, is that it's funny because it's called Backstage Pass to give people a lens into like how we work as a team and at Mural, and there's like this Backstage Pass, right? So yeah, we always communicate. So everything's happening in Zoom and Mural, and then we use Slack to message on the behind the scenes. So if there's something I really need his attention about that I don't necessarily, this doesn't happen that often because a lot of times I want people to know and see the lumpiness of facilitation sometimes. So sometimes like, Mark, we need to like shift this, or like, what do you think, Mark? This seems like, do we need to go forward? Do we need to go to the next activity? But if there's something like, I'm trying to think of a scenario where I've had to message him, maybe just like a time check with him to say like, Mark, we really need to get to the getting feedback or something. And we need to wrap up. We're almost at the end of time. I'll message him in the background about that. But yeah, I think it's important. That's another thing, is to set the outsets when you're starting any session, is to say, like, these are all the channels we're going to be working on, so that if I do need you for something, you're available. Because I don't want to message him in Slack and him not see it or something like that. But I do try and make everything in Backstage Pass as transparent as possible, because I think that is the one space where I also feel safe to be like, yeah, that didn't go the way I planned, but that's okay. Or like, Mark, we can't hear you. Do you mind unmuting, or something like that? Like, we're both try and be as authentic as possible on Backstage Pass as facilitators.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of it, that everyone knows that it's non-scripted and it's a live thing. So it gives you also permission to experiment and let everyone join the learning experience.
Yeah. And I love that word too, permission. That's like, that's, I think, what we're trying to do for facilitators and for collaborators, is give them permission to try something different, to be uncomfortable, to mess up or to fail or something, and also to teach them how to recover, so that if we mess up, we have permission to recover as facilitators. Like, oh man, actually, a good example of that is one session we had, Mural was down. And the whole point of Backstage Pass is to show people working in Mural. And we were, understandably, like, what are we going to do? Like, this session was supposed to be about this and working in Mural, and Mural's not working. So what do we do? So we were going to cancel it. And we ended up having a conversation around what to do when online meetings fail and the technology fails, and how do you recover from that. And it ended up being this like really awesome session, because people appreciated us being transparent and being like, this happens, and we had to cancel some workshops today and people were upset, but if this happens to you in a meeting, even if it's for a moment, this is how you can recover. And giving people permission and giving ourselves permission to be open about that was really an awesome opportunity, and people appreciated it. So that's a big piece of Backstage Pass too.
So what is your advice then from the session? What can you do? What is the key thing to do if technology fails?
Yeah, always have a backup plan. And this kind of goes into the planning piece too, is not if, knowing when the technology will fail. And failure can be either, yeah, literally the tech is down, or somebody is having trouble accessing the technology, so it's failed for them. And that's like the human-centered design aspect, is like, it doesn't matter if it's working, it's not working for them. So how do I prepare them, and how do I prepare myself to help them? And being able to have backup plans for that moment or that experience. And I think also realizing that your schedule is probably going to change, and now you're going to need to pivot things a lot, or pivot things a bit to get to that goal. Or you might not get to that intended outcome in that session, but you're going to advance the conversation in some way, and you can still make space for it, because all of this technology, all it's doing is helping make way for conversation. And so I think
beautiful.
That, yeah, I think that's, it's hard. And that's why like plans are so great. But then it's also like, okay, just need to remember that perspective.
Yeah, and that the purpose is at the core, and not the technology or the sticky notes. So this is when technology fails. What makes for you a workshop fail?
A workshop fails when it hasn't accomplished success for the group or for the sponsor. Like I like to ask, what does success look like to you, like in this meeting or in this workshop or in this session? And I think there's short-term and long-term success. Like can be, by the end of this meeting, I want to have agreement on the proposal that we're going to make to leadership. And then the long-term success would be that proposal's made and pitched to leadership. So I think a workshop fails when it doesn't accomplish the short-term goal, but then it also doesn't help the long-term goal. Like workshops, a lot of times are looked at as like this magic bullet where like we're all going to get together in this space and we're all going to like do sticky notes and there's going to be this great energy. But then the energy can attenuate really quickly if people don't follow up and aren't held accountable. So I was just talking to Allison Coward, who's amazing, and she's talking about like how do we bring workshop culture into team culture and dynamics. So I think I'm having more appreciation for the importance of not looking at success as the workshop, but the actions that come after it, and the facilitator needing to help reinforce those actions coming after the session as well. So, yeah.
And I think that's what's great about the mural as a tool, as opposed to the on-site physical workshop room, because everyone can just revisit it and don't fall off the wall.
Yes. The most distracting thing ever is when the sticky notes fall off and you're like taping them up and catching them.
Yeah, and then putting all these kind of scotch tapes around them, and then you cannot move them around anymore. And actually nobody wants to go back there anyway, because it's handy. But on the mural, you can continue the conversation and working on the outcomes afterwards. Building on it.
Right. Everything's there. It's not precious. It's easy to manipulate. And it's a way to help reinforce, like, remember guys, we were all here and we all said this. And so how are we going to make this happen? And that's something actually, when you were talking earlier about like, what did I wish I knew is how much as a facilitator, part of your role is to make sure that either if you're not the one helping things go forward, you need to make it really clear who needs to be responsible for keeping the momentum after that session or that workshop. So yeah, I think Mural's been a big help for our teams and for our customers to be able to keep that conversation going.
So would this then be something that you put on the mural? So at the end of the session, you have a row with responsibilities where everyone puts their name next to a task? How would you do that?
Yeah, if it's not done in the meeting, afterwards for sure. So I think a lot of, especially right now at Mural, we're working with people across time zones. We're working with people with really tight schedules because we're all really busy and we're going between meetings after meetings after meetings. So I think it's important to, if not during the session itself, afterwards say these were the top tasks or responsibilities. We're going to put it into some sort of task tracking manager or project management system, like we use Asana, and we're going to assign roles and responsibilities. I wish I was able to do that a lot more live in sessions because I think it creates more accountability with the group. But if not there, then it's following up with people asynchronously. So just say, put it in Slack and say, these are all the tasks. Everyone to own one thing, and which one do you want to take? And getting people to sign off in Slack in a lot of ways too is effective and has been working well for us.
Yeah, it also kind of creates this peer accountability or almost peer pressure. Okay, everyone can see it. Your name is there.
Yeah, and you own it. This is yours now, and go do it. Where I don't want to micromanage anyone. So yeah, it definitely helps create that experience, which is nice.
Yeah. I just recall the one idea when I was on the Backstage Pass to create kind of a gamified approach to incentivize teams to come back to the mural and continue working on it, where you take a screenshot of your animal each time that you log into the mural, and then the person with the most animals kind of wins.
Oh, that's awesome.
I like the idea.
Yeah, that's really nice.
With everything you've done and learned, do you have a hashtag for yourself?
This one was, I loved this question you asked. And there were a few that came to mind. And I was trying to look at like popular hashtags on Instagram and stuff, but that was kind of silly. So I think for some reason, hungry always comes up in my mind because I'm always just really hungry to learn. I'm also just really love food, and I'm always really hungry in that way too. But I just really like, I'm always on this continuous path to understand and learn and ask, why did it happen? And why did you do it like that? And I think hungry is a good one for me. Hungry in every sense of the word.
Yeah, love it.
And explore. I think I put explore as well as another one that I is just like always out looking at what's out there and what's new. And I trying to, even when it's really busy, take a moment and look for inspiration where I can as well.
Which seems like an outcome of hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're hungry, in whatever sense, you need to get out there and explore in order to find this either food for thought or food for fuel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not being, I'm never satisfied. So I'm hungry and I'm like, okay, well, I need to go satisfy this hunger. And so I'm going to go out and look outward to build understanding or to find a new recipe to cook or just get a snack.
Nice. Is there one key learning you got from a year of backstage or working from Mural?
Just one. My goodness, it's been a year. It's been such an amazing, the amount of growth and change that this company has been through and the world has been through, going, just shifting to having to work from home and unlearning about the value of this type of work out of necessity is really fascinating.
What do you mean by the unlearning?
I don't know. I said learning, just like a lot of people are learning how to work remote. There is a lot of unlearning though too, because I think it's unlearning the mindset of you can only do something in the office. And of course there are essential workers who do need to go into the office still, or go to work, but a lot of mindset shift for people where, we can't do this work outside the office, or we have to be in the office to have team connection, or we have to be in the same space to get work done and be productive. I think a lot of people are understanding that that's not the case. And even though we haven't been in the office, we're still more productive. It's been a very different challenge for people, rather to log off or to disconnect versus anything else. But gosh, a key learning. I think thankfully Mural has a really good culture of testing things and trying things, especially since we're in pretty unprecedented times for our company and as a society. So I feel like I've learned and been comfortable putting things out that feel unfinished, rather than holding on to things and feeling like they need to be polished. And Backstage Pass, the same thing, isn't polished, but being willing to test and experiment and try things and get feedback. Just the early prototyping has been a big key learning for me that has carried over into other things like Mural Minutes is something I just experimented with and has been well received, and building this learning experience team I'm on and having the space to experiment with that too. It's been kind of like this going to college, where college is the space to experiment and learn and try. And I feel like I'm back in that mindset again, which is so wonderful. I don't it sounds so corny, but every day has been different because there's just always something new to learn and to test and try and come back and experiment with.
Nice. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you for the space to share.
If someone fell asleep after the first 2 minutes of our conversation and just woke up now, almost an hour later, what would you like them to take away if they don't have time to listen to the entire show again?
Well, I hope they had a nice nap. That's such a fun question. Well, you asked such good, thoughtful, these are great questions. I think I want them to know and remember what facilitation is really about at the core, which is creating space for conversation and bringing about success for a group, whatever form that is for them. Yeah, I think that's the core.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experience and your journey.
Yeah. Happy to. Yeah, it has been. It's always nice to talk with you. So I appreciate it a lot.
I see you later from the Backstage Pass.
Yes, it'll be so fun. Looking forward to it. And thank you for making me just remember a lot about facilitation and going into that session. I think being more mindful of it. I appreciate that.
Nice.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.